The biggest mistake you can make is showing up. Every time you're too available, too present, too easy to reach, you erase yourself. Not because people stop seeing you, because they stop valuing you. Presence without scarcity is invisible, and invisible people are forgotten. But there's a darker truth most people never discover. The moment you disappear, not forever, not dramatically, just strategically, something shifts. People who ignored your texts start checking on you. People who took you for granted start wondering where you went. That's the phantom effect. And today, you're going to learn how to use it. But before we go any further, I need to say something clearly. This is not about playing games. This is not about manipulating people for the thrill of control. This is about understanding a fundamental law of human psychology and using it to reclaim your value, your power, and your peace. The goal is never to harm. The goal is to stop being harmed. Now drop this affirmation in the comments right now. I control my presence. Let's begin. Number 1, scarcity is a language of value. Everything rare is precious. Everything abundant is ordinary. You already know this. You feel it. The restaurant that's always fully booked feels more desirable than the empty one. The person who's always busy feels more important than the one with nothing to do. The message that takes hours to arrive feels heavier than the one sent in seconds. This isn't logic. This is psychology. And it runs deeper than you think. Machiavelli understood this centuries before modern science confirmed it. He watched princes and rulers rise and fall, and what he noticed wasn't about armies or wealth. It was about perception. The rulers who commanded the most respect were never the most available. They were the most selective. They made people earn their audience. They made their presence feel like a privilege, not a guarantee. Here's the painful truth. If you're always available, you are training people to see you as ordinary. Every time you respond instantly, every time you show up without being asked, every time you make it effortless for people to access you, you are devaluing yourself in their minds. Not because they're cruel, because their psychology is simply following a law they never consciously chose. The law is this: what costs nothing is worth nothing. And this doesn't just apply to things. It applies to people, to time, to attention, to presence. When you become someone whose attention has a price, not a financial price, but an energetic one, people start treating you accordingly. They stop assuming you'll always be there. They stop taking your presence for granted. They start working to keep you in their lives instead of assuming you'll just stay. This is the first principle of the phantom effect. Before you can make people miss you, you have to stop being something they can always have. Scarcity is not manipulation. It's honesty. It's the truth that you are not infinitely available because your time and energy are finite and valuable. When you operate from that truth, people feel it and they respond to it. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My presence is a privilege. Number 2, disappear before they expect it. Timing is everything. And the phantom effect only works when your withdrawal is unexpected. Here's where most people fail. They pull back after they've already been taken for granted. They go quiet after the argument. They distance themselves after betrayal. And by then, it's too late. The withdrawal reads as reaction. It reads as hurt. It reads as weakness. The strategic mind moves differently. You withdraw at the peak, not the valley. You become less available when things are good, not when things are broken. You pull back when people still want more of you, not after they've already started to want less. Machiavelli wrote that the wise leader never allows his subjects to grow comfortable with his presence. He appears. He commands. He withdraws. And in that cycle, he maintains a psychological tension that keeps people attentive, engaged, and slightly uncertain. Uncertainty is the engine of obsession. Think about the people you've thought about the most in your life. Were they the ones who were always there? Or were they the ones who kept you slightly off balance? The ones you could never fully predict? The ones whose next move you are always trying to read, that's not coincidence. That's psychology. When someone is predictable, your brain files them away. It knows what to expect, so it stops paying attention. But when someone is unpredictable, when you don't know what they'll respond, when you don't know how available they'll be, when their presence carries a slight uncertainty, your brain stays activated. It keeps thinking about them. It keeps trying to solve the puzzle. You become the puzzle. This doesn't mean you become cold or erratic. It means you stop being a guaranteed constant in people's lives. It means you introduce a natural rhythm of presence and absence. You're warm and engaged, then you pull back. You're visible and active, then you go quiet. Not dramatically, not angrily, silently, deliberately. And the people who took your presence for granted suddenly realize something has changed. They just can't name what it is. Number 3, your silence speaks louder than your words ever could. Most people believe power is loud. They believe the person who speaks most commands a room. They believe presence means noise, visibility means volume, and influence means constant communication. They are wrong. The quietest person in any room holds the most unread information, and unread information is power. When you go silent, not out of sulking, not out of anger, but out of strategic choice, you do something psychologically devastating to the people around you. You remove yourself from their ability to predict you. You take away the data they've been using to calculate your reactions, your emotions, your next move. And people cannot tolerate that vacuum. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine. It craves predictability. It needs to know what's coming next. And when you suddenly become unreadable, when your silence stretches beyond what they expected, their brain goes into overdrive trying to fill the gap. They replay recent conversations. They look for clues. They reach out under the pretense of casual conversation. They bring your name up to mutual friends. All of it, every single move they make, is an attempt to solve the puzzle your silence created. Machiavelli once said that the wise man speaks less than he knows and acts more than he explains. And that principle isn't just about efficiency. It's about power. Every word you withhold is a card you keep in your hand. Every explanation you don't give is leverage you don't surrender. Here's what silence communicates that words never can. It says, I don't need you to understand me. I don't need your validation. I don't need to defend myself or explain my choices. I am complete without your comprehension. That energy is untouchable. People feel it before they understand it. They sense that something is different about the way you carry yourself. They sense that you've stopped needing them in the way they've grown used to. And that shift, that barely visible withdrawal of need, changes everything. When you stop explaining, you stop being predictable. When you stop being predictable, you stop being controllable. And when you stop being controllable, you become the most interesting person in any room. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence is my power. Number 4, remove the reaction. Remove the power. Here's a mechanism behind every successful manipulation you've ever experienced. Someone needed a reaction from you, and you gave it to them. That's it. That's the whole system. Every person who has ever drained you, controlled you, or made you feel small, they all operated on the same fuel. Your reaction, your engagement, your emotional response. The moment you give someone a reaction, any reaction, anger, sadness, defensiveness, excitement, you hand them control. Not because they earned it, because you gave it. The phantom effect cuts the supply chain completely. When you remove your reaction, you remove their power. When you stop engaging with people who are designed to drain you, they lose their footing. They reach for the lever they've always pulled and find nothing there. No resistance, no response, just silence and the slow realization that they no longer have access to you. This is not passivity. This is the most active choice you can make. Machiavelli watched this play out in every court he studied. The leaders who responded to every rumor, every insult, every challenge. They exhausted themselves and gave their enemies a map to their weaknesses. But the leaders who responded selectively, who let most provocations pass to them like wind, they conserved their energy and their mystery. Their enemies didn't know what bothered them. And what you can't bother, you cannot control. Here's the practical application. Someone is trying to provoke a reaction from you. Maybe it's a dismissive comment. Maybe it's a deliberate slight. Maybe it's someone spreading a narrative you know is false. Your instinct says respond. Your instinct says correct them, defend yourself, set the record straight. But the phantom effect says something different. It says, let them speak into the void. Let them build their narrative to an audience that will eventually see the truth. Let them exhaust themselves trying to get a rise out of someone who is no longer paying attention. Your non-reaction is not surrender. It's a declaration. It says, you are not significant enough to disturb my peace. And there is nothing more psychologically destabilizing to someone seeking your reaction than receiving your absolute indifference instead. Number 5, create the pull through strategic absence. Attraction, real attraction. The kind that makes people think about you at 2 a.m., the kind that makes people bring your name up in conversations you're not part of. That kind of attraction is never created by presence. It's created by absence. This is the central law of the phantom effect. You cannot make people miss what they still have. You cannot make people want what they can always access. You cannot become someone people think about constantly by being constantly available. The pull is created in the space between your appearances. Think about how this works in practice. When you're always present in someone's life, always responding, always showing up, always available, you fill all the space. There's no room for them to miss you because there's no gap where your absence could live. But when you create gaps, deliberate, comfortable, non-dramatic gaps in your availability, something happens in that space. They think about the last time they were with you. They replay conversations. They notice your absence the way you only notice silence after sound. And in that noticing, the pull begins. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful position is not the one that's always visible. It's the one whose absence is felt. The general who never leaves the battlefield becomes part of the scenery. The general who appears only at critical moments becomes legendary. You must become someone whose appearances feel significant because your absences are real. This requires something that most people find deeply uncomfortable. It requires resisting the urge to fill silence with noise. It requires letting a conversation end without extending it. It requires not reaching out even when you want to. It requires trusting that your absence is doing more work than your presence could. Here's what happens when you commit to this principle. People start initiating. The conversations that you always started start coming from the other direction. The invitations you always extended start arriving in your direction. The check-ins that you always perform start showing up in your messages from people who never checked in before. Not because you played a game. Because you told the truth about your value by acting like someone whose time and presence actually mean something. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My absence speaks volumes. Number 6, let them fill the silence with their own imagination. Here is one of the most powerful psychological forces you will ever learn to use. You don't control what people think about you, but you control how much information they have to work with. And when you give people less, their imagination fills the rest. And imagination is always more powerful than reality. When someone has full access to you, your thoughts, your schedule, your emotions, your daily life, they build a complete picture. They know exactly who you are. There are no gaps, no mystery, no uncharted territory. And familiarity, complete familiarity, is the death of fascination. But when your presence is partial, when people only have pieces of the picture, their mind does something remarkable. It builds a story around the gaps. And that story is always more compelling than the truth could ever be. Machiavelli described this as the power of the incomplete portrait. He noted that rulers who revealed too much of themselves to their people became ordinary in the people's minds. But rulers who maintained an element of the unknowable, who allowed people to wonder, to speculate, to project, those rulers held a grip on the imagination that no amount of truth could create. You are not exempt from this law. The people in your life are doing this right now. The person who knows everything about you has stopped imagining you. But the person who only knows part of you, they're thinking about you constantly, filling in the blanks with something better than reality. This is not about deception. It's about restraint. It's about understanding that sharing less is not dishonesty. It's strategy. It's the practice of letting people want more because you haven't given them everything. Stop narrating your life to people who haven't earned the full story. Stop explaining your decisions to people who will use that information to predict and control you. Stop being an open book to anyone who hasn't proven they can handle the chapters you've already shared. The less they know, the more they think about you. And the more they think about you, the more power you hold in that relationship without ever saying a single word. Number 7, the return. How to reappear without losing what you built. The phantom effect is not disappearance. It is a cycle, and the return is where most people destroy everything they built. They go quiet. They create distance. They let the pull build, and then they come back wrong. They come back apologetic. They come back explaining where they were. They come back filling the silence that was working in their favor with words that undo it. And in one conversation, they hand back everything the absence had earned them. The return must be as deliberate as the withdrawal. When you reemerge, you do not explain. You do not justify. You do not reference your absence as though it was something that needs to be addressed. You simply return with the same quiet confidence that governed your exit. You are warm but not desperate, engaged but not hungry, present but not overpresent. You bring value to the interaction, and you leave before it runs dry. You give them enough to remind them why they missed you, and not so much that the missing stops. Machiavelli wrote that the leader must understand that his return must be as calculated as his departure. The general who returned from battle must return as a conqueror, never as a man who was simply away. The energy of the return determines whether the absence elevated you or was simply forgotten. Here's the practical truth. When you reappear after a period of strategic absence, you have a window. People are attentive. They're relieved. They're slightly unsure of themselves in your presence. That is the moment of maximum influence. Use it by being completely, fully yourself, not performing, not managing, simply being the person whose absence they felt, and letting them remember exactly why they did. Do not overstay. Do not over-explain. Leave them wanting the next interaction before this one is fully ended. And when you pull back again, as you will, as you must, the cycle deepens. The pull grows stronger. The value grows clearer. This is a phantom effect at full power. Not a trick, not a tactic. A way of moving to the world that communicates at every moment that you are someone rare. Someone whose presence carries weight because it is not guaranteed. You just learned the 7 principles of the phantom effect. Scarcity is the language of value. Disappear before they expect it. Your silence speaks louder than your words. Remove the reaction. Remove the power. Create the pull through strategic absence. Let them fill the silence with their own imagination and return with the same energy that made them miss you. But here's what I need you to understand before you close this video. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about becoming cruel. The phantom effect is not a weapon you use against people you love. It is a standard you set for yourself, a declaration that your presence has value, your time has worth, and your attention is not something that belongs to everyone simply because they demand it. The world will always want more of you than you can give. The question is whether you let the world's appetite dictate your output, or whether you decide what you give, when you give it, and to whom. The most powerful people throughout history were not the ones who showed up everywhere. They were the ones whose arrival changed the room. They were the ones whose absence was noticed. They were the ones who understood that scarcity is not a limitation. It is a strategy. Now you understand it too. Use it with wisdom. Use it with intention. Use it not to play games, but to protect something real, your energy, your peace, and your value. And the next time you feel the pull to over-explain yourself, to respond when you should stay silent, to show up when your absence would say more, pause. Remember the phantom effect. Remember that the most powerful move you can make is sometimes no move at all. If this changed how you see yourself and your presence in the world, hit that like button. Share this with someone who gives too much of themselves to people who don't deserve it. Subscribe to this channel, because we're just getting started. And drop your final affirmation in the comments right now. I am the Phantom. My presence is power. My absence is unforgettable. Until next time, stay strategic, stay selective, and stay untouchable.